And what is the force of law, if any, of executive orders?
Those are two very good questions, but they're very different topics. So if you don't mind them separate. A recess appointment is a time-honored pattern by which, if the Congress is in recess, the President is in a position to make the appointment, which only lasts till the end of that term of Congress, unless the appointment is ratified by the Senate. In all of American history, there's been a countervailing pattern, which is that either the House or the Senate doesn't go out. And if they don't go out, they're not in recess. And this is a dance the two branches play, which is a part of our balance of power. This president is the most anti-constitutional president in the history of the United States.
That's right. Absolutely. Woo!
I'm about to go mental here, so don't bear with me. One, there's no doubt in my mind that he is a Saul Alinsky radical who believes in breaking down the norms and the patterns of the United States, and that what he is doing is egregiously unconstitutional and a violation of the law.
Woo! Amen. Absolutely. Amen.
A very simple answer, which I would apply to the National Labor Relations Board and to the new credit agency that he has illegally appointed him to. The Republicans in the House should announce that they will in fact cut off all funding, period. That they will not fund it, it will cease to exist. The power of the purse is unequivocally in the Congress's hands. No money shall be spent except as passed by the Congress. And they should just say, you want a constitutional showdown? We will show you a constitutional showdown. You act illegally, we'll cut off your money. Time somebody did.
Yeah.
When I was Speaker of the House, we collided head-on with Bill Clinton, and the result was we got to 4 consecutive balanced budgets. We reformed welfare for the first time in history. We had the first tax cuts in 16 years. But he had to know that we were deadly serious.
That's right.
Now, does a president have advantages? Of course. If he's a liberal Democrat, he has even more advantages. He has the power of the White House to communicate, and he has the elite media on his side. But we have 2 greater powers. We have the Constitution of the United States, and we have the American people. As to executive orders, I believe they go all the way back to George Washington, and a correct executive order establishes within the law how the presidency will execute the law. That's why it's an executive order. It does not make law, it does not change law, and if it tries to do so, it is by definition a violation. I intend to use executive orders on the very first day, shortly after the inaugural address. I want to stop and sign a number of executive orders. The very first one will abolish all of the White House czars as of that moment.
It just keeps getting better.
Any order which infringes upon the law should promptly be met by a lawsuit by the Congress on the grounds that the President has now violated his oath of office and is making law instead of executing law.
Yes. Yep.
As co-chairman of the Sovereignty Caucus in the United States Congress, sovereignty of the United States is very important to me. Many Americans are leery of the United Nations and efforts of the UN officials and other international organizations to constrain American power and infringe on our sovereignty. Conservatives see treaties such as the Kyoto Protocol, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, the proposed UN Arms Treaty, programs like Agenda 21, as international efforts to regulate the United States in ways that the American people would never agree to through our democratic process. If elected, how would you treat the United Nations and operate within their international system to protect and promote United States national interests while preserving American sovereignty?
Well, that's a very important, very powerful question, and let me point out that what makes it truly disturbing is that a significant part of the American elite joins with these efforts to undermine American sovereignty because they know they can't get what they want inside the U.S., And so they seek clever international agreements to force us to do things we would never do if they came at us straight on. So take, for example, the Small Arms Treaty, which is an effort to violate the Second Amendment.
Right.
I am unequivocally totally opposed to any kind of treaty which limits the right to bear arms, and in fact, I would lead an effort by the United States to convince the rest of the world that every country should have a Second Amendment, because that way the people can protect themselves from the government, and every country should have that right. As Speaker of the House, I sent a separate delegation to Kyoto to watch Al Gore try to sell out the United States. And that's what they were doing. The environmentalists were there cutting a deal with the Europeans and the Asians.
Tell us about the brother.
The deal was that they would adopt an agreement that was totally anti-American, so the Europeans loved it, and they would exempt China and India, so they loved it. And it was a total mess. And ironically, this is really weird, our folks came back and they said, you realize the last few hours, they ran out of money to pay the translators. This is literally true. So the last few hours, they were all there babbling with no translation, trying to figure out what it was they were writing. And what was the result? The Kyoto Treaty was rejected in the U.S. Senate 99-0. I mean, Teddy Kennedy and John Kerry voted no on the Kyoto Treaty. Now, for Al Gore to have designed the treaty so bad that even his left wing thought it was crazy was truly a remarkable achievement. When I left the speakership, I agreed to co-chair with Democratic former Senate Majority Leader George Mitchell a United Nations Review Task Force. Let me assure all of you, however bad you think the UN is, it's worse. This is a corrupt, bureaucratic, largely anti-American collection of people from all around the world who have come in order, frankly, to find ways to limit and undermine us, often at their own advantage. The United Nations needs to be thoroughly overhauled. If I were president, I would say that every ambassador I appointed, one of your top 3 assignments is to gather votes for the fundamental overhaul of the United Nations, and I would say to the State Department, one of your primary assignments is to begin building a democratic alliance outside the United Nations so we can make clear that a General Assembly, which has countries often smaller than our counties, should not be taken overly seriously, because it is now increasingly an anti-American assembly. It has been growing more and more so for the last 30 years. And our State Department, far from standing up to it under Obama, our State Department recently held a conference with the Organization of Islamic Countries in order to talk about how to censor Americans from criticizing Islam in a way which I regard as the most fundamental betrayal of the American system you can imagine. We have to stand up for our civilization, and we have to stand up for our sovereignty, and we have to stand up for America as a country that is exceptional. And frankly, I don't care if that irritates the international elites.
Oh, yeah!
Speaker Gingrich, 1/3 of South Carolina's congressional delegation is African American, which may well be the highest percentage in all of Congress. Our governor is of Indian descent, and I can't think of a single provable allegation of voter suppression in my 16 years as a prosecutor. So how much longer is South Carolina going to have to ask permission from the Department of Justice to do something as simple as requiring a photo ID before you vote?
You know, I think you misunderstand the sensitivity of the Attorney General, whose interest in having dead people, illegal people, non-people, independent people have their full rights. You know, the Democratic Party everywhere in the country is terrified of honest voting.
Yeah.